Alright guys, so this week we are taking a look at the Hexproof deck, and kind of why it isn't more popular than it is kind of the focus. So this is the specific list that I'm working on, and this is a brew by Deluxe. You can check it out above there for the exact details. This is the one deck I want to focus on. I have shown you a couple other variants here in the article this week, but I wanted to talk about this one specifically. Mostly because I was able to get Deluxe's insight and kind of what is going on with Hexproof and whatnot. So, one of the things that, of course, is going to be a common denominator in the Hexproof deck is going to be the Hexproof creatures. Now, Hexproof was a relatively new mechanic, and it's really great. It allows you, to target your own creatures, but things with Hexproof cannot be targeted by an opponent. Now, before Hexproof was around, what we had was Shroud, and Shroud means that a creature or whatever permanent has Shroud is untargetable. And that means that you yourself cannot target your own permanent as well as your opponent. And that's all well and good, but what Hexproof does is kind of break that and allow you to enchant it and you to make it bigger and stronger and give it all kinds of great stuff, but your opponent can't target it to kill it. Now, Hexproof was kind of a thing where it was homebrew. It was really, beyond Rogue. It was definitely fringe. And it showed up every once in a while because it was kind of a cool idea. It was one of those things that was mostly reserved for the casual room, and people just wanted to make it work, even though it really didn't. It was one of these things that it was almost forced. There was no real full reason to make it playable, but that did really change with Return to Ravnica. And the reason this deck is around and is now a rogue and a serious threat out there is entirely this card right here, Ethereal Armor. Now, this is an enchantment that when you enchant a creature, it gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control and first strike. Now, this is amazing. You want to talk about power creep? This is a 1-cost enchantment that makes creatures bigger for each enchantment on the field. If you have a Slippery Boggle and you enchant it with Ethereal Armor, it right away is a 2/2 first strike. Like I said, if that +1/+1 wasn't good enough, then they add the first strike, which really just makes it absolutely brutal. And this comes in at common, and that's something that's definitely interesting to say at the very least. Now, prior to the printing of Ethereal Armor, we did have a similar effect in Ancestral Mask, and that was kind of what was driving the original, like I said, fringe version of the deck. Ancestral Mask has a similar thing where enchanted creature gets bigger for each enchantment on the field. However, some of the differences are very notable. Ancestral Mask is, of course, giving a creature +2/+2, so it's increasing the size significantly larger. But in order to do that, you are paying a larger cost. It comes in at a 3 converted mana cost, whereas the Ethereal Armor obviously is at 1. Now, the huge thing here is to be able to get that turn 1 creature into play, one of these Hexproof guys, and then get that turn 2 Ethereal Armor, and that's really your go-to great start. The other thing, Ancestral Mask, and this is more subtle, but the one thing that really draws this back and not make it as powerful is the fact that it says enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each other enchantment on the battlefield. What that means is if I have a single creature, a Slippery Boggle for example, and I attach it with Ancestral Mask, that is still a 1/1 creature. That creature is not getting +2/+2 until I have a second enchantment on the field. With Ethereal Armor, it doesn't have that other enchantment part. It just says each enchantment, so it counts itself, whereas Ancestral Mask does not. That will all of a sudden, as soon as that comes into play, make our creature +1/+1 bigger. So that was really kind of the settling stone for this. Not only is this a cheaper card, which makes the deck clock faster, but it is also something that by itself can do great things. If you had a little bit of enchantment removal and you were able to clear some up, all of a sudden Ancestral Mask is not so good. If you spread it out, enchantments, and one of your things gets killed and all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where Mask is all you have left, not so good because it's not actually making your creature any bigger. So that was definitely one of the biggest things that all of a sudden made this a playable deck. Now, there were other things along the way. We did also get Abundant Growth in the Innistrad block, and that is an enchantment. It doesn't actually provide you with more mana than you have. It just allows you access to different colors. But the most important thing that it allows you is that card draw. Card draw is, of course, a mostly blue mechanic. Green, especially, does not have a lot of options when it comes towards card draw. They're usually more commonly known for things like land fetch. So getting a cantrip, in this form is great. If you look at the mana cost on this, the largest spells that you have are at 3, and everything else is at 1 or 2. So it creates quite an interesting mana curve. So what makes this deck tick? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. You have a set of creatures that are hexproof, and what you want to do is enchant these creatures with any number of spells that make the creature bigger. It's pretty simple, and then they attack through, and your opponent has a whole bunch of trouble with it because they cannot actually target your own creatures. You can target them, you can make them bigger, but your opponent can't do anything other than cast an edict to get rid of it. Now, one of the great things about this deck is, like I said, the printing of ethereal armor. This in itself is fantastic, and what it ends up doing is it now runs a combination of a lot of these single-costed land enchantments in order to ramp up the number of enchantments on the field, so that when ethereal armor comes down, your creatures are out of hand big. Some decks will run things like Wild Growth and whatnot. That is another one that is a single cost enchantment. That one will give you additional mana off that. One of the key cards here is Utopia Sprawl. Utopia Sprawl is better than Wild Growth because of the fact that it gives you access to white mana, which is necessary for not only Ethereal Armor, but Armadillo Cloak, which is an important part of the deck. That allows you the chance that you can run entirely forest-based mana. This means that you don't have to worry about siding in plains, and you won't have to run into an opportunity where you may have an opening hand that has a turn 1 creature but no green mana source. Wild Growth is great, but Utopia Sprawl, works much better because of the fact that it provides you with white. The most important thing about the two of those in contrast to Abundant Growth, is the fact that they provide additional mana. When you have a forest that is enchanted with Utopia Sprawl, when it is tapped, it provides you that additional mana, so all of a sudden you're getting 2 from 1 land. And that's definitely the important part. Your ideal play, as you'll see in some of these gameplay videos, is the forest into Utopia Sprawl, and then you can, upon untap, use it to play a Scout or Boggle with the Ethereal Armor on turn 2. That would be an ideal opening for this deck. Now, the deck also runs, obviously, a full set of Rancor. You can't say enough about this enchantment. It is strong, and it gives you trample, which is, one of the most important things. I think another one of the overlooked benefits of this card is the fact that it can keep coming back. So if they do edict a creature or find a way to kill something off, it comes back to your hand, so you get that chance to reuse it. It's something that once it hits the battlefield, it's coming back to you. They need to attack it before it actually comes into play. So usually that comes in the fact of killing the creature you're targeting with it, or countering it, and you've taken away the ability for them to target down the creature that you're targeting, thanks to Hexproof. So you can't say enough good things about Rancor and how good it is. Armadillo Cloak is mostly in here for the life gain. Again, you get that trample, which is fantastic as well. There are occasionally situations where in some aggro decks you will not be the aggressor. They will get an early play, they will play first, something like that. They can get some of the damage going, and you need a little bit of life gain to come back from it. So the life gain off Armadillo Cloak will allow you to not only get back into games, it will just allow games to get out of hand. Again, Ancestral Mask, we talked about, allows you to get creatures bigger off of how many, but it doesn't benefit from the fact that it pumps up by itself. So you also run a bunch of Aura Gnarlids. Now, this particular list that Deluxe is running runs a full set of Aura Gnarlids, and we kind of talk about it in the article there. A lot of versions of the deck only run about 2 copies. They try and keep it to a minimum because of the fact that they can be targeted. However, the Gnarlids can really get big. If they're finding ways to get your creatures off the board and keep your creatures under control, that's fine. You're still going to be able to pump this Aura Gnarlid up off of this array of land enchantment spells, and you're going to have a lot of those. It's very common for you to be sitting there with 3 or 4 of these, and those alone are going to make this Gnarlid a really good size. One of the underlooked things, again, with the Gnarlid, and I talk about this a lot, is the fact that it has that first ability where creatures with a power less than our Gnarlids cannot chump block it, basically. So that is a great addition. One of the things I want to talk about here, and I know Deluxe was really pushing this card and championing it and made a lot of great points for it, is Lush Growth. Lush Growth is a great card because of the fact that it not only gives you access to white mana, but it allows you a chance to shut down an opponent's land. What you're looking at here is basically a main deck strategy against post. You can use these to shut down a post deck. You can use it to shut down a sacrifice land off of Storm. It is definitely a spell that can be used in an offensive manner as well as defensive manner. So it's definitely a great addition, something that gets overlooked. A lot of times, like I said, they will decide to run less lands in favor of something like a Wild Growth or something like that. And like I said, I'll post another list. I'm writing this as I do these videos, so there will be another list here, and you can see kind of what the variations look like. I feel like I'm going to break this down pretty well in the article there, so I don't think I have much else to say. What I'm going to do with this is a little bit different. Usually I run through some tests, take a deck, play through some games, and that's usually what you see. What we're doing a little bit differently this time around is I'm breaking it down in kind of a different manner. What I said, the subject of this is not so much looking at, hey, here's a deck that I'm calling Hexproof and this is how it works. That's not really the focus here. I mean, sure, I wanted to point out some of that, but what is more important to me is I'm trying to discuss why it's not more popular than it is. If you came to some Magic player and you talked about this mechanic where, hey, I can target my creatures but my opponent cannot, they would say, wow, that's pretty powerful. That's going to be a thing, right? So why is this really powerful mechanic where I can make my creatures bigger and you can't do anything about it? Why is this not seeing more play? And this is kind of what I wanted to talk about. So what I did is broke things down in a couple of ways. I did talk to Deluxe, and Deluxe is, and I break down there, he's a great player. He's well known in the Pauper community, has played a lot of Stompy for a while, and recently switched to Hexproof when this all came about. So, he's been playing it a lot in the dailies. Even if you don't see his name on the list there, he tries to avoid the popular times where Wizards is most likely to post results. So what you're going to see is, he's well experienced with this deck. So what I got him to do is we played some games. We played what I call a favorable, an unfavorable, and a 50-50. So we sat down and I played the Hexproof list that he gave me against his same Hexproof list. So you can take a look at how the matchup goes in the mirror. We sat down and I played Mystical Teachings against the Hexproof list, and that gives you a look at what I call the unfavorable game for Hexproof. Especially the list I was running, my Teachings list runs very heavy on the edicts. So, that is definitely something that is hard for Hexproof to deal with. And then we ran a set of matches in, I played Is It Post. Now, Post is definitely a favorable game for Hexproof. So what it gives you hopefully is a look at how it breaks down from the different angles. Like, this is why this deck is considered favorable. This is kind of how it works against these and why it is so successful and why it should be played for these reasons. And then taking a look at the opposite end of the spectrum, this is one of the deck's worst matchups. This is where it struggles. This is how that is seen. And hopefully this gives you a well-rounded view of kind of the deck and how it performs from all angles. I know some of the matches didn't save, so the replays are missing, but hopefully you still get the idea, and between these videos and the article, I can kind of convince you maybe on why this should be played more. I know there will be some players out there who will probably not be so happy about that because they kind of like that this deck is under the radar, but I think of all the rogue strategies out there, this is a definitely a legitimate one. And I even cautiously call it rogue because I really don't feel that it should be considered rogue. This is definitely should be a legitimate strategy. And I was just going through these daily events as I record the meta information and realizing that it really wasn't seeing as much play as I would have expected it to when I saw the spoiler for Return to Ravnica and seeing what Ethereal Armor had to offer. So hopefully you guys enjoy this.